Great. Thank you so much, Andrew and Adam, for getting us started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Melinda Wood, and I serve as the Vice President for Enrollment Management here at JMU. I have been a part of the JMU community since 2021. I always feel like it's important to reintroduce myself because in a lot of ways, I'm still a newcomer to the university. I started at JMU in 2021 as our AVP and Director of Admissions, and we are currently in a search, getting ready to launch the search process to welcome our new Director and AVP to the university. So until then, you have me. And I'm happy to talk a bit about the class and what's going on here at JMU. I feel like for the last 3 years, I've come on and said it's been a banner year, and I'm getting ready to say those words again. And it surprises us every time it happens. And you can see that as a good and a bad, I think, in a lot of different ways. But I want to start first by sharing just some general institutional updates. I think this is always a good place for you to kind of know what's happening on our campus. First and foremost, I want to talk about the fact that JMU is currently under a presidential search is currently underway. So we are looking for our essentially 13th president of the university, and we have an interim in place right now, Charlie King, who has been a part of the university for more than 25 years, leading us in this time of transition. And then we hope to announce and have a new university president join us by July of 2025. So that process is currently underway. If you are a JMU alum or have been to our campus, I also want to just let you know about some construction projects that are happening. Our beautiful Carrier Library is under a renovation project, and that is expected to be complete and open to our students by the fall of 2026. We're also making some necessary upgrades and enhancements to residence halls on campus. So for those of you that are familiar with the university, we have the village area. And so over the next 8 to 10 years, we'll be essentially making rebuilding, I think is an easiest way to say it, rebuilding the residence halls in the village area. Building 1 is scheduled to open in the fall of 2025, and then we'll move on to the next residential process or the next residential area on campus to make those changes. Last but not least, I wanted to make sure you all were aware on the academic affairs side, a pretty exciting change that is happening in our general engineering degree at the university. We've actually introduced concentrations within the engineering program. And so now I'm not an expert and I'm not an engineer, but I will tell you those concentration areas, there are 3. We have added civil and environmental, geo-environmental, and electromechanical systems within. Those are the 3 concentrations that JMU is now offering within our general engineering program here at the university. And Chris Gothard, who is always on it, has just added those to the chat so that you have that piece and you can do some exploration and read a little bit more about those new concentrations. So that's kind of what's happening on campus. In the past, we've talked about JMU's big move from regional institution to a national institution, our move to R2. We continue to have great success in and out of the classroom or on and off the field, maybe. So athletics continuing to kind of thrive here at the university for us, winning our first official bowl game in December, which was super exciting. In the Boca Bowl, we played in December and winning that game. So exciting things that are happening, continues to be happening here on our campus. But that's not why you're here. You're here to talk about what's going on in the applicant pool and what we're seeing and what those trends are. And that's what I want to share. So we joined the Common Application in the fall of 2021. So our first class using the Common App joined us in 2022. And since then, we continue to see exponential growth and interest in the university. So we're talking about an institution that historically received anywhere between 23 to 24,000, 26,000 applications to now just every year continuing to grow and grow in terms of the number of students that are applying and expressing their interest to the university. Do I think that's the ease of access of a Common App? Yes. But do I think there's a lot of sincere and general interest? I absolutely do. And the reason I say that is because for the last 3 years.
Is that too loud?
No. I know that we're coming at 10.
The reason I say that is because over the last 3 years, we have over enrolled our first year class significantly. This year, we welcomed almost 5,000 new students to the university. And because we have over enrolled for the past 3 years, we're beginning to create a lot of stress and strain on our infrastructure, which I'll get into in just a minute as we talk about what we're looking to do this year. So early action or our applications for the fall 2025 as of today is just over 44,000 students have applied. 44,063 students. That's about 10.5% growth over last year. That growth is coming to us primarily in early action. So for comparison's sake, last year we had an applicant pool of about 26,000 early applicants. This year it was 31,296. That's a 16% growth in 1 year in one pool. And that's what we're seeing. Students are applying and they are applying to us early. Our regular pool is very consistent, about 12,500 students with maybe a little variance on that for the past 3 years, really now 4 years of being on the Common App. But the growth continues to be in early action, which quite frankly is beginning to stress our system that there's so much interest in that early pool. What I want you to know a little bit about the applicant pool, just so you have a general framework and reference, we are continuing to see a balance of in-state and out-of-state applications. So this year, right now, it's about 50% in-state and 50% out-of-state. And we continue to see a lot of interest of students out of state in our tried and true areas like New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Maryland. But we're seeing more growth and interest from our southern areas too, like North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida. We're also seeing those numbers grow in terms of interest in the university. But our applicant pool as a whole represented all 50 states, DC or District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and 118 other countries. So of the 44,000 students that have applied this year, they are representative, broadly representative of our world, which is great to see JMU having that reach. Our first generation applicant pool continues to grow. And this year, our applicant pool is at about 24%. And obviously, it'll take some time before we know what those admit numbers look like and what the class looks like. But it's good to see that there's continued growth in our first generation population in the class as well. Our male-female balance is, actually, I didn't write that down, but let me pull it really quickly. Our male-female balance in terms of our applicant pool is about 59% female and 41% male. So that's another important piece for you to have. Okay, moving on, I want to talk a little bit about where our class is going. What are our goals? Because I started off by saying we've over-enrolled the past 3 years, given the application growth, given the continued interest in wanting to be a part of JMU and needing to pull back those reins a bit because of the stress to our residential spaces and our classroom spaces that we have. So this year, we're going after a realistic enrollment goal of 4,800 students, and we really have to be at that 4,800 mark right now to ensure that we can accommodate everyone. And so with that, I want to talk a little bit about the breakdown of what we want to have in terms of our in-state, out-of-state balance of our 4,800, and then we'll get into the specifics of what early action looked like and our admit ratios there. So for the class that we will welcome in 2025, we hope to see a class balance of in-state, out-of-state at 73% in-state, 27% out-of-state. So there's a little bit of growth on our out-of-state population, because over the next 6 years, JMU would like our overall undergraduate enrollment to go to 75% in-state, 25% out-of-state. So in order to do that responsibly over the next 6 years, we'll be admitting roughly 27% to 28% of our incoming students are looking to enroll, I should say, 27% to 28% of out-of-state students over the next 6 years. So very slow for us, not trying to upend what you have historically expected from JMU. Although you may be saying, wait a second, things changed in this early action admission decisions. And so I'm going to address that as head on as best as I can. And I'm coming back to the fact that we had 31,297, I think is what I said, early action applications, which is a 16% growth. And what we're seeing is that early pool continues to be incredibly, incredibly strong. Chris will talk a little bit later on about how we make admission decisions. But the best way that I can think to frame this for you as I say how competitive this class is when you just look at a reported high school GPA that comes to us on the transcript, right? That basic reported information. The average applicant was at a 3.7. When the dust settled and our admission decisions for early action went out the door, it was at over a 4.1. I think it was like a 4.1, 4.12, very competitive. We admitted roughly the same number of students that we admitted last year. 19,836 students received an offer of admission out of early action, which is comparable to last year, but a much larger applicant pool. 31,000 students applied. So it took our admit rate down from last year of 75% of students being admitted early action to 63% of our students being admitted early action. So that's a different difference, and you may be seeing that and experiencing a change. And it wasn't our intention to throw you a curveball. It never is, but we simply have to respond to what we receive and try to make the best decisions, knowing that we cannot continue to grow or over-enroll our class to the university. Chris will talk about the way we make making decisions. We do conduct a comprehensive review. We dive deep into course curriculum, the rigor of curriculum, grade trends in those classes. And so Chris is going to walk you through that piece of it. Given the applicant pool, given the competitive nature of the pool, we did defer slightly more students this year into our regular round. About 7,800 students were deferred out of early into regular, and we will reconsider all of those students again in the pool. Again, regular decision is typically about anywhere between around 12,500 students will apply regular, and that's very consistent. And so when we re-review, we often find that our early action applicants are still academically stronger and better sometimes than our regular pool. And so we try to admit generously, try to admit as many students as we can. And we do find that a lot of our early action students will gain admission through the regular process. Not a guarantee, nothing is a guarantee, but I just want to put that out there for you. And as a reminder for any of your students who have been deferred in our early pool, we do not require that students submit mid-year grades or additional letters of recommendation. Through the Common App, you all know that if mid-year grades are there and available, we can pull them if we need them, but they are not a required component that we're asking students to submit. In fact, we're not asking your deferred students to do anything other than, unfortunately, wait. wait for our process to go through and forward, and will release their decision in March. But no additional work or information is needed for them at this time. We will request it if we do actually need something from the students. So that's a look at early action and kind of what's going to happen in our regular deadline pool, where we stand. And again, the enrollment goal for the fall is 4,800 students, which will probably be will probably offer a total of about 26,500 offers of admission, which could be about 1,750 to 1,000 fewer offers than we granted last year in order to make sure we keep our enrollment goals. So it's going to be slightly fewer offers of admission as we think about, as we work toward making sure we hit our 4,800 enrollment goal. I wanted to talk about preliminary financial aid because that's always, the next question is, when is scholarship decisions and financial aid going out? Well, thank goodness we're back on track in terms of the FAFSA being up and working for our students. We're lagging a little bit in terms of FAFSAs being submitted and pulled into our system, but nothing like it was last year. I mean, we didn't have any data at this point for our first year students. So we're running slightly behind, but what my financial aid team is telling me is that the information is flowing. We're getting results and data that we need so that we can build preliminary financial aid packages. Scholarship decisions are already underway for our students who were admitted in our early pool. And your students can expect to receive a preliminary financial aid award from us. Generally, I'm going to say 3 weeks following maybe 3.5 weeks. Let's just give them a little bit of time to make sure everything's ready. But about 3 to 3.5 weeks from the point of the decision release. And so we released our early action decisions on the 23rd of January. So roughly we're looking at mid to late February, and those students will get their financial aid and scholarship packages information. Honors College has already released their early action decisions. Those are out and available to the students now that applied. And if you had a student who auditioned to be a part of our College of Visual and Performing Arts, those decisions also have been posted in their My Madison account. So that is complete. And then the next thing I want to talk about is just regular decision timeline. So we have started reviewing our new regular decision applications. That process is underway, ongoing. We hope to wrap up that reading by mid-February, and then we can start reviewing all applicants, including those that have been deferred, and our regular through our committee process, and look to release our decisions, I'm going to say by mid-March. We're going to try to have those out and available to your students so they know where they stand with JMU and can make a decision about enrollment. We do expect that there will be a wait list given the application volume, given the continued interest of so many students that want to be a part of our community. We will have an active wait list, but last year we were very quick to let students know as close to May 1st about the status of that wait list. And we will do that again. We do not believe in holding on to a wait list any longer than we absolutely have to. So I've said a lot in a relatively short period of time, but I'm going to pass it over to Chris, who will talk about how we make those admissions decisions. And then we will be here to answer questions and to do any follow-up. Chris?
Thank you so much, Melinda, and good to see some familiar faces on the call. Appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. I do want to reiterate that the Q&A feature is active, and I see that many of you all have found that. Please continue to use it, and we'll be sure to address all of those questions, or as many as we have time for here today, including clarifying any numbers that Melinda shared out. Just at the outset, I do want to paint a picture of what a competitive profile looks like here at JMU, particularly in that early action applicant pool. And then I'll talk about some next steps and some logistical things that might be coming your way from some of your students. Just a quick plug, we do have a program called the Visiting Counselor Day, and that is scheduled for the back part of March, and registration is on our website, active right now. If you want to learn more and go through a mock committee experience with us and see how we make decisions, that's going to be a really good way for you to do that. And so just want to make sure that that's on everybody's radar. And Andrew will share information about that in the chat. But with that, how do we make decisions here at JMU? Really, all decisions come down to a student's academic record, particularly their high school transcript. And we're looking at three different things. The first is going to be the rigor of their high school course curriculum, and we evaluate that within the context of their specific high school. So we look at what is available, what is offered at your school. Do you have college level classes, dual enrollment, Cambridge, International Baccalaureate, AP classes available? Do you have honors, accelerated, advanced classes available? And are your students taking advantage of those courses? Second part of our review is going to be looking at their final grades in core classes. We want to see students have mostly A's and B's in the core areas of English, foreign language, math, lab science, and social studies. And then the third area that kind of fits in between the two that we just covered is coverage of our core areas. We want to see students challenging themselves, having that fourth year of math, having foreign language, taking those lab science classes. And so those three factors are what really make our admission decisions. Now, every school is a little bit different in what they offer and the competitiveness of the pool out of that high school. And so you might see a little variation there. But generally speaking, that's what a competitive profile looks like. When I get to the defer talking point here in just a minute, I'll give you some examples of a profile of a deferred student just to hopefully answer some of those questions, but happy to address those in greater detail here in just a moment. So just to talk through admitted students, then deferred students, then denied students, and what those next steps look like. Admitted students obviously have the good news, and the next step is evaluating their offer of admission. As Melinda said, preliminary financial aid award notices should be out in the next couple of weeks, and so they should have a complete picture of what JMU will be offering them and be able to start evaluating our offer amongst the other offers that they have received. We have May 1st as our deposit deadline, again, holding to that this year. And we have 3 admitted student days leading up to May 1st for your students to explore JMU a bit further. Those dates are March 1st, April 4th, and April 11th. It's an event that we call Choices, but that's a really great avenue for your students to learn more about their intended major, to connect with other admitted students, see student life, go on a tour of campus, all of those different things. And so we hope that you'll help us promote that opportunity for students to get a better picture of what the JMU experience has to offer them. Our deposit this year has held at $400, so students will accept their offer of admission in their My Madison portal by paying that $400. If that poses a financial barrier, if that's the only reason that a student is unable to commit to JMU, please have them work with the admissions counselor for your school, and we can discuss a partial or full deposit waiver. Happy to have those conversations. We don't want the finances to be a barrier for any student. Now to the defers. So as Melinda said, we deferred roughly 8,000 students in our early action applicant pool this year. Many of you all may have seen students who were admitted in early, that same profile last year, be deferred this year. And that's a result, as was said, of the competitiveness of this pool. A couple of examples just to help you understand where we were coming from. Since rigor of curriculum is the most important factor in our decision-making process, students who maybe had all of their upper level classes in their senior year, for example, taking their first college level classes then, we want to defer those students this year to see how they're doing in those courses, to get a gauge on their abilities in those classes before making a final admissions decision. You also may have seen that the grades in the core classes was an area that we paid very close attention to this year, where a student with perhaps a B average last year would have been admitted. We were looking for slightly better than a B average to be admitted out of that early action applicant pool. And so those are two of the main profiles. If your students had a few A's and a few C's in core classes, then that's a profile that would have been deferred this year, where last year we may have taken it. Hopefully that gives you an idea of where we were coming from and what we were looking for out of that process. But again, happy to give some other examples if that would prove helpful. For deferred students, there is no action that is needed for their application to be reconsidered. If your school process is to send mid-year grades automatically when we get to that point, please feel free to follow that process. We will have access to them through the normal channels. And if we want to see those mid-year grades for a particular student, we will be able to pull them from Common App, from Score, from Parchment, however you're going to send it over to us. If we don't have mid-year grades for a student who we want to see them for, which is not all students, we will be sure to reach out to you and or your student to request those specifically. I do know that many students who are deferred also like to send a letter of continued interest, and they are certainly welcome to do so, although how much weight is placed on that, it's going to be minimal at this point since the academic review, the academic components really make up our decision as we proceed through this process. In terms of denied students, some of your students may have received a denied decision in the early action applicant pool. Those are students who we know are not going to be competitive at any point in the process. And I think that also helps you with some of those conversations with deferred students, right? If we deferred them and did not deny them, that means that we think that they still have potential, that they have strong academic credentials, and that we are looking to give them every consideration in that next round. Those denied students, I know that they are discouraged at this point in the process. If they are dead set on JMU, we are happy to work with them. We would just want to discuss the transfer admissions process, spending a year at another institution, covering core areas, raising their GPA in some cases, getting A's and B's in those classes, and joining us fall of 2026 at the earliest. I do invite those students to reach out to their admissions counselor so that we can have that conversation, set expectations, and work with them through that process. But now to get into a few of the logistical things, and hopefully these are just reminders and not new information, but we are happy to answer specific questions about specific applicants. And we do that through what is called the decision inquiry form, which is found on our website. Andrew's also going to drop that into the chat if you want easy access to it there. We just ask that the student you or the student's parents, if they're listed on the application, fill that out, tell us who the student is, and ask the question through that format so we have a written record and documentation of that conversation. But we are happy to share insights into what we were hoping to see that wasn't present in that early action application. We also know that some of your admitted students may already know that JMU is not where they will end up. And so we ask that they take action through our application withdrawal form, help us clean up our numbers and get a nice picture of what we have left in the pool. And so Andrew will also drop that in the chat, and we ask that you share that out with students who maybe already have plans other than JMU for next fall. We would appreciate you promoting that as well. One thing that tends to come up at this point in the process is schedule changes. Students who are admitted who maybe want to drop that class now that they're admitted. We do want to stress that our offers of admission are based on the schedule that we had in the application. And so if students want to have a conversation about whether dropping a particular class would change the admissions decision, we are happy to do that. But we do plead with you that that conversation takes place before your student actually goes through with dropping that class. And so we invite that conversation, but do want to have an opportunity to weigh in to make sure that there aren't any surprises. If your students are in the regular decision pool and want to make a schedule change, we just ask that they send us an email letting us know about that schedule change so we can update their file and have an accurate profile for them as we do our evaluation. Moving to decision lists. Some of you all may have already requested and received these, but here at JMU, we are happy to provide you, the school counselor, with a complete list of your early action applicants and how they fared in our early action applicant pool. I do want to stress that this is a manual process. We are happy to offer it, but it does take a little bit of time. And so we thank you in advance for your patience as our processing team works through that and turns those requests around as quickly as we can. But happy to provide that list. We just ask that you submit the form that Andrew will also provide in the chat. And then looking to our regular decision applicants, we are planning to send our incomplete notices in the next week or two. So please stand by for that. If we have any RD applicants who are missing documents for, we'll be making that known to them so that they have a chance to rectify that before we withdraw their application. And then final note from me is on regular decision late applications. We are happy to review those on a case-by-case basis, but as Melinda said, we have a lot of applications this year. And so we do need to have a good rationale for why we missed that application deadline, but happy to have that conversation and look at that to see if there's anything that can be done for a student who falls into that boat. And then I want to just talk briefly about the Honors College. I know that some of your students applied to the Honors College and received a decision of defer. Those students will be reevaluated in early April, just like the process into the university. There is no additional documentation that needs to be submitted, nothing that your students have to do. They will be reconsidered by the Honors College as they move into that regular decision applicant pool, and they're looking to notify students in early April of their final admissions decision. If you had any students who were not admitted into the Honors College or who are deferred and end up not being admitted into the Honors College, they are able to apply for admission as a current student to JMU, and so we invite you to present that opportunity to them as well. They could start as early as spring of 2026, their second semester here at JMU in the Honors College, if that's something that they're very passionate about. But with that, I will turn it back over to Andrew to reset us and prepare us for any questions and answers that may have come in the chat.
Yes, sorry, thank you. I was finishing up answering one Q&A here, so I apologize for the moment of silence. Thank you all for continuously adding things into the chat. There are some questions here that we do want to also answer live, whether that be Melinda answering the question or Chris answering the question. So I'm going to go through some of those. If you have any other questions as we're kind of going through other questions, feel free to, again, to use the Q&A chat function to submit them. So the first one that we're going to talk about here is, can students who were deferred but JMU is their #1 school complete internal university scholarship applications before decisions are released, or do they have to be admitted to access those resources?
Yeah, great question, and thank you for that, Olivia. Students are able to work on our internal scholarship process as soon as they are an applicant. So they do not have to be admitted to have access to those opportunities and to pursue those opportunities. So any student who, even if they're a deferred student, any student who is an active applicant with access to their My Madison portal has access to the Madison Scholarships Hub, which is housed in that portal. And so we invite them to work on those scholarship opportunities in hopes that they're admitted in the regular decision round and would be considered for any of those merit-based opportunities there.
Awesome. Thank you for explaining that one a little bit more, Chris. Another question that we had here is, we already talked about it a little bit, but maybe you can share a little bit more on the timeline here. So if counselors want to have that student application decision list, yes, we are doing it again to answer that first one, but Chris, could you talk a little bit more about maybe the timeline of when they can think about when they're getting those lists out?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So we have already started working through and processing those decision list requests. So hopefully you have received it. If you have not, or if you just submitted during this call or after this call today, we'll try and get that to you within a week or two. But again, I want to stress it's a manual process. It does take a little bit of time for us to create it and get that over to you. So we thank you in advance for your patience. We'll try and get that to you as quickly as we can.
Awesome, thank you. And the next question is a little bit of taking into consideration a different grouping of students here, but could you give us an idea of the number of students accepted through the transfer pathways?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do want to reframe it just a little bit here at the outset. Unlike the freshman process, in the transfer process, there are no two students who are the same, right? They have different classes, different grades, different institutions, different ways that they get to us. And so the admit rate for the transfer process is not a good reflection of what a competitive profile looks like. Last year, we had just under 2,500 students apply to transfer into JMU through one of our 3 entry terms for the calendar year. And we accepted roughly 1,400 of those students, enrolling about 870 of them.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Another question talks about demonstrate interest. I know we hinted at that as well, but do you track it specifically more for out-of-state students, particularly in some of the more interested states that we have coming to JMU?
You
Oh,
want me to
sorry,
answer
Chris. I didn't notice that you were taking a sip of water. Um,
Yeah, happy to answer that. So here at JMU, we do not use demonstrated interest in the admissions process to the university. What we are basing our decision on is the academic profile of the student. So demonstrated interest is not a factor that is taken into account. Where we do or can use demonstrated interest is in the scholarship process. Here at JMU, we have a very limited number of scholarships available, and we want to match those with students who we know want to come to JMU and need that help to make that happen. And so demonstrated interest can, but is not always, a factor in the scholarship determination process, but it is never a factor in the admissions determination process.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And I apologize. I didn't notice you were muted for that second. The next question, I'm going to go here to Melinda for a minute to talk a little bit more about addressing the test optional at JMU. Students are feeling it really not a test optional cycle. So could you talk more about JMU's test optional currently and maybe a little bit more knowledge that you might have insights on there?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Suzanne, because I think it's an important one. JMU has, kind of to give you the history, we have been test optional since the first admitting class was 2018. So we've been doing this work as a test optional environment for a very long time. And I can say that this year was much like other years, and that like other years, and that the test optional piece was alive and well in our process. In fact, we work and operate a little bit more like test blind because so few of our applicants are giving us that data. So we only will load into our system official test scores. So if a student reported those on their Common App, we are not seeing that information. So if they're self-reporting, we don't see it. It's not anything that we consider. So when I look at the percentage of students, because I did that math real quick when I saw that question come in, because I wanted to be able to tell you the exact number. So official submitted test scores to JMU this year, out of 44,063 applicants, only 8,238 submitted an official test score, which is 18.69% of the applicants. Small, very small number. So I can honestly and authentically say JMU is test optional. Students decide whether or not they want to submit that extra data point as a piece to be considered in their application. And if they do, we will see it and we will review it. Only official. So if it's self-reported or comes to us in an unofficial capacity, it is not a part of the review process. So I just wanted to let you know that and how we're operating and how that looks for JMU currently.
Awesome. Thank you, Melinda. And I'm going to stick with you here just because I feel like this question might be more in your realm of knowledge here. As you know, we only offer early action and regular decision application offerings. Is there any possibility, do you think we'll offer early decision next year?
No, I think we will continue to offer early action and in our regular pool. I don't see us going back to offering early decision. I don't know when JMU removed that, honestly, only being a part of this community since 2021. We want to be, I'll just say this, I don't see us going back to having that as an option for students. It's not in our cards.
Awesome, thank you. And sticking with you here, Melinda, we've obviously discussed a lot of growth at JMU in terms of our app numbers. And could you talk a little bit more about was the growth in EA similar between in-state students and out-of-state students, or was there a difference there?
I can. I think I can. Well, I'd have to pull the information. So the applicant pool overall was about 50-50. And there was an increase in our out-of-state applicant pool in early. So it was slightly larger, but when the applications came in and all was settled, we've landed at about 50-50. I don't have the exact numbers or the exact percentage on me for early action. Chris, you're always so well prepared. I bet you do. So I do, I apologize for not being able to give you that exact breakdown in our early pool, but it was slightly larger. I think it was, and this is just going off of memory, but it was something like 48 to 50, no, 49 to 51, if what feels right. And then when our regular pool came in, we've settled in at 50-50. So.
Thank you, Melinda. The next question is, are students automatically considered for merit upon admission, or are they only considered if they apply via My Madison? Chris, if you want to touch more on that one a little bit.
So all students are automatically considered for merit-based scholarships just by applying to the university. We have a very decentralized awarding process here at JMU where all of the different academic departments have an allotment of scholarships that they receive, and they're able to select awardees and make those offers. And they use data from the admissions office to make those determinations. We also have certain scholarships, particularly our signature programs, that require students to take action on that opportunity, to apply to that scholarship, perhaps interview for that scholarship. So students are automatically considered for some of our merit-based scholarships, but there are others, our larger dollar scholarships, that require some additional action to be taken.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that for us, Chris. And then I know we mentioned it before, but could you just reiterate who can fill out the admissions decision inquiry forms?
Yeah, absolutely. So the decision inquiry form can be submitted by the student, the applicant. It can be submitted by the school counselor, or it can be submitted by a parent or guardian, so long as that person is listed on the student's application. So one of those three populations, but we do need the parents to be listed there to be in compliance with FERPA.
Yes, thank you. Moving on here. Does JMU consider residency in financial aid offers?
As a state university, yes, we have some grant dollars that are only available to Virginia residents. So residency can have an impact on what students are able to be awarded. So that can be a factor. For scholarships, all students are considered regardless of residency. And then there are certain programs that might specify one way or another. For example, our Centennial Scholars Program, which is JMU's only full ride, is only for Pell Grant eligible Virginia residents. So there are a few programs that might have some limitations there, but residency can be a factor for financial aid. Yes.
Awesome. And another person said a question about if they were to send their SAT, ACT score for a deferred student, it wouldn't be something that we necessarily factor in or has a huge impact on their end decision, correct?
Correct. As Melinda said, those test scores, when they are submitted officially, are still not part of our evaluation process. They're not weighted in our review, so they're not going to be helpful or necessary.
Yes, I saw that message and I think I accidentally pushed it away. I wanted to kind of come back and clarify, right? We see a score. That doesn't mean we use the score, right? So if those official scores are in the record, we will see them, but it is not a part of the evaluation process because so few applicants are sending us that data point that there's no way to make sense of it in context of the school if only one student in a school has a test score and you've got over 100 applicants, right? That's not usable data to inform a decision about the entire applicant. So I just kind of wanted to come back and clarify, right? It is not a part of our evaluation.
Yeah, and I just want to also kind of put out there again and reiterate that it is optional to begin with. So, it's one of those things that to Melinda's point, if they submit it, we will see it, but if they don't, it was never part of something that we needed to see anyway. Melinda, I do have this question for you as well. So is there any consideration to send notifications for admissions decisions to be posted outside the school day? Particularly, this person was saying how some of their students were looking at decisions in the middle of the day, kind of disrupting classes or their current place of belonging.
Yeah, Alice, I appreciate this question so much. It's something we've been talking a lot about. So JMU historically has posted our admissions decisions, and we do so in the middle of the day, but we try not to say a word about it. We don't post when we're releasing our decisions. We just quietly do it when we know they're ready. And so we don't intend to disrupt your day. Truly, we don't want to do that. In fact, we ask that our social media presence doesn't become active until after 3 or 4 o'clock on the day that we've posted. We do not send any text messages or emails until at least about 24 hours after those decisions have gone live. But your students are checking, right? And they're looking for those decisions. So it is never our intent to disrupt your day. But I appreciate your question because it just reinforces that maybe we need to, instead of posting around noon or 1, maybe we need to push until 2 o'clock. We do this, and we do it quietly because of infrastructure concerns, right? When students start hitting the system, we want to make sure that our system can handle it, which is why we do not make a big splash, which is why we try to keep it secret. We're not doing that to make them crazy. We're doing that because we want to make sure that our systems can handle it when those decisions start going live. So Alice, I hope that's helpful, that I will bring this back. In fact, I screenshotted your question just to take back to my tech team and to take to our marketing team to say, we have to make sure that we're being really considerate of the school day because we don't want to be disruptive.
Yeah, thank you, Melinda, for sharing a little bit more insight on that and our current reasonings for doing it when we do it. I got a direct message here that talks about, if we want to reach out to students, if we want mid-year grades. Yeah, so if we want mid-year grades or any additional information from a deferred student, we will reach out, and that's how we will acquire that information. So, if for whatever reason, I would definitely have your students, all your students even, be very proactive with looking at their email that they applied with, because there is potential that we are going to reach out to them and look for additional information. But at the beginning, we don't need it right away. It's not something that we will necessarily review right away. And then another person asked, how heavily are letters of recommendation considered? Kind of going back to our optional pieces here, letters of recommendation are considered an optional component of an application. So that means if we do get a letter of recommendation, we will look at it. We will have it in our possession. But in terms of how big of an impact it has on the decision, it doesn't, unless, I will add a little caveat here, if there's something in the letter of recommendation that might be helpful in terms of knowing a little bit more about the student. For example, they have a learning disability. They had a death in a family that may have impacted their grade. While we might not be able to, place that in front of maybe a poor grade, it could add the context that we need to make a more informed decision. So a letter of recommendation in itself isn't necessarily going to bear weight on a decision, but could provide necessary context to make a better decision when we're going through the evaluation process. So thank you for putting those in the chat there.
Andrew,
yeah, go ahead.
I do want to say that we read all letters of recommendation. So while it is optional and not required, if you do take the time to do that for an applicant from your school, we do read all of those that are submitted. And as Andrew said, make those notes in the evaluation sheet for the admissions committee if there's anything that is going to be helpful to make our final decision. 95% of them say Johnny is a great kid, and so some of them don't add a ton of value since they're all the same in that respect. But for those letters that tell us that new information, we certainly want to make note of that and use that to inform our decision. So thank you all for taking the time to write those.
Yes, thank you. I personally appreciate reading them as well as I know a lot of my colleagues do. So Chris, could you talk about some summer college programs that are considered for admissions? And does JMU offer any of these programs?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm glad that we're looking ahead to next year's class as well. Our team is already hitting the road doing some spring travel, and so we are thinking that way ourselves. Spring programs in and of themselves do not carry weight in our evaluation process. Some of those perhaps allow students to get dual enrollment credit or something along those lines. That would be a factor in our admissions decision. But I think that it's more important to talk about the experience, right? Having the opportunity to get on a campus, to get comfortable in that space, to have a cohort of other students that are similarly situated. And so it can be incredibly valuable for some of your students, and we certainly want to acknowledge that and to promote that. JMU does have a few summer programs. I'm a little bit biased as an alum from the Honors College here at JMU, but I think one of our more popular programs is called the Summer Honors Institute. And that's a 1 week residential program here at JMU where students live in our Gray Street apartments. They go to some academic mock lectures. They do some activities in the Shenandoah Valley in the local area, and a great way to form those relationships, to get a better taste of what the JMU experience has to offer. And so I want to promote that opportunity. We also have a School of Professional and Continuing Education, which runs a lot of our summer programs and some of those other offerings. And so I encourage you all to check out their website for other things that might be available. I know we oftentimes have a STEM camp, a band camp, some of those different things that might speak to different interests that your students may have. But we offer them and just encourage you to check the website to see what's going to be a good fit.
Yes, thank you for that. And Chris, as you mentioned the Honors College again, quickly in your answer, could you give us an idea of the competitiveness for the admission in the Honors College? Do you have any insights on that? Or is it more something that they should reach out to the Honors College to get more specific details on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do not have current numbers from this year, but I can share a little bit about last year in hopes that it would inform where we are right now. So the Honors College is very competitive here at JMU. Only 6% of JMU students are enrolled in the Honors College. Their growth tends to match or exceed the growth that we see here in the Office of Admissions. And so, as Melinda said, we're up about 10.5% here at the university. I would suspect that the Honors College saw a comparable growth in their pool. That is why they wanted to use that defer decision to see how many students are going to accept their offer and to be able to give every consideration to those students. Last year, they received about 3,000 applications from first-year students. That was overall, and they were enrolling a cohort of about 325 students, plus or minus 25 there. So again, there are honor-specific classes that they have to be mindful of to make sure that they have support in the classroom and space to be able to accommodate that. But roughly 10% of the applicant pool enrolled in the program. I don't have the specific admit rate, though, that I can share off the top of my head.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, for sharing your insights on that. We got a question about how much weight do we place on a student's personal essay or statement. And just to reiterate again, kind of similar with the letters of recommendation, personal statement, it's a completely optional piece. We will read it again if we are given one, but unless there is something that really kind of gives us insight and context on the student and maybe struggles that might have impacted grades, we don't really consider what is put in there as a means of making a decision. But again, similar with the letter of recommendation, if there's something that we need, a necessary thing to take note of, we will use that as part of like making that decision. Melinda, I'm going to throw a question here back to you to discuss a little bit about the infrastructure concerns with having such a large incoming class. If you could talk more about that.
Yes, happy to address that. So as I mentioned very early on, we've over-enrolled our classes for our first year class over the last 3 years. And we never set out to do that, right? I think that last year in particular, it took us all by surprise because but I boil it down to the challenges students were facing with FAFSA. And so we had more students that were able to say yes to us, maybe because financially it was a better fit for the family and difficulties they were facing. So we welcomed last year a first year class of 5,000 students. We had wanted a class of 4,800. So, but we, the things that, but we responded, and we responded quickly because we had 2 years of practice already. And so every student that was residential, our first year class is residential, so they were housed. They had housing spaces. We did not have to implement triples like we did the first year that we over enrolled in the fall of 2020, the fall class of 2022. So our infrastructure has improved. We've hired more faculty, opened more sections. So I love the question of whether or not, are we responding? Yes, we are responding. Sometimes students aren't, the perception that they can't get the course that they need or the classes that they want could sometimes also have to do with the timing of when that course is happening, right? An 8 a.m. or a 6 p.m. or something like that doesn't fit into their day. But we have no, to my knowledge, right? This is not my expertise, but to my knowledge, based on the information that flows through the university, we have not been placed in a position where a student couldn't be reasonably accommodated to reach the classes that they need for their degree program in order to graduate on time without implementing summer coursework. So we have responded, but we can't continue to over enroll the class and continue to place that stress on our system. So thank you, Alice, for that question.
Yeah, thanks, Melinda. And kind of just to go off of that, has the over enrolling of students impacted the amount of students that get off the wait list and are admitted to the wait list?
Yeah, thank you for that question too. I appreciate it, Hunter. It has. Over the past 2 years, we have relied on our wait list less and less. So we have admitted a few students from the wait list, and I would say a few is defined as less than 50 or maybe 75 students admitted from the wait list that we've had. So we've made some offers, but not very many, which is why as soon as we recognize that the class is full or we're at our capacity limits, we are releasing and closing our wait list out for students to be able to move on and make decisions about where they're going to enroll. I could just try to address the last question that I see active in the chat, which is about engineering. I noticed that Chris wasn't angling to answer that one live, and that's probably because we don't necessarily have that answer, right? Are we adding professors? Are we adding sections? Right now, what I can say is that we are experiencing interest from our students in engineering, but I wouldn't say to you that engineering itself as a discipline or as a program is experiencing exponential growth. That growth and that stress continues to be in our College of Health and Behavioral Sciences, and it is our nursing program, our College of Business. These are areas that are experiencing a lot of interest and growth for us, academic departments. Engineering is popular. It is seeing steady interest and growth, but not growing at the same rate as some of the others that I mentioned for you here. And so I think that what we are experiencing and why the engineering department added concentrations is because students want to do a deeper dive in specific areas. And obviously the theme of that was environmental with the 2 concentrations that we have added. So that's my knowledge and awareness right now in terms of where we are with the engineering department. Chris, is there anything that you might know that you'd want to add a little different there?
Just reiterate at least the last message we heard from the engineering department. We met with them over the summer, and with the rigor of the classes that students take at the front end of the program, it is rare for students who really want engineering and succeed in those classes to not be able to proceed all the way through the program and have the supports that they need, whether that be laboratory space or access to faculty members. And so, as I'm sure you hear at a lot of other schools, that's a tough tough on-ramp into a major, a lot of really rigorous classes. And so many students do start with engineering, refine their major choice a little bit, and then ultimately graduate from JMU with a degree outside of that discipline. But students who are committed to engineering and are successful in that coursework typically and traditionally have been able to access everything that they need to.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And in the interest of time, I am going to end it here. Just because we said 10 to 11, I want to be respectful of your times getting back to work as well. Thank you all for coming today. We greatly appreciate all of your support and help and activity. Please feel free to reach out to any of your regional counselors if you have any questions, and be sure to follow the counselor education program website, as well as keep up to date with the newsletters and webinars that we have as we continue going on with the year. But thank you so much. I hope you all have a great day. And thank you again, Chris and Melinda, for coming today and sharing all of your knowledge and expertise on this matter. And we'll see you all soon.